This weekend, we've obviously got the release of Ant-Man Quantumania, the latest installation in the MCU and the first Phase 5 entry. It's going to be exciting. I cannot wait. I'm getting psyched up for this as I get psyched up for every MCU entry. And like, that's funny because, you know, the MCU has kind of been a haven for controversial takes. Well, I don't know about controversial, but you know, it hasn't been the reliable universal hit that it got used to being, perhaps through Phase 3. For me, part of that is because it's become a haven for bad takes. Sometimes when things get so popular, it's just part of pop culture. There'll be an inevitable backlash because we love to build things up and tear things down. That's part of culture. Like, you'll get little things like things that I hate hearing are, why was Thor a comedy character in Love and Thunder? That came out of nowhere. It was totally pointless when we know the answer. Like, if you'd watched Endgame and you'd seen that, he literally decided at the end, like, he went through a traumatic time where, obviously, and spoiler alert if you haven't watched all of the MCU so far, or Infinity War or Endgame, they lost at the end of Infinity War. Thor took that personally and as a sign of weakness on his behalf and had a breakdown, became Fat Thor, and then at the end of it, when he redeemed himself, then decided, I'm not going to try be Thor, son of Odin anymore and King of Asgard, and I'm just going to be myself. And we saw him do that. And also as well, that fits in with kind of trauma storylines and how people evolve. You don't just click your fingers one day or something good doesn't happen in your life and you just become untraumatized. You tend to evolve and become a new person after you suffer a trauma. So Thor becoming a new person and becoming the guy we saw in Love and Thunder, for me, made total sense. Again, I'm not saying it was a perfect movie, and I'm not saying any of the movies in the MCU Phase 4 or any of the TV shows Marvel Studios produced for Disney Plus and so on, particularly Moon Knight, like, I'm not saying that they're all good. Moon Knight was a disaster. It was an absolute snore fest. There was one good episode and the rest was just, what are we actually watching here? Look, it's hit and miss, but I think we kind of got a bit spoiled by Phase 3 and expected and kind of put a bit of revisionist history on it and told ourselves that every MCU movie was amazing beforehand and that this is now a crisis, when that's not the case at all. Phase 3 was just spectacular. We got Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, obviously fantastic. You had the debut of Spider-Man, you had Civil War, you then ended in Infinity War, Endgame. They were firing on all cylinders, but again, that was a particularly amazing patch. This is also the same studio, which, and I don't mean this in a bad way because I love the MCU, brought you the Incredible Hulk. It brought you the second Thor, I can't think of the name right now, which was an absolute disaster. That's how much of an impact it left on me. They've had misses. Iron Man 3, I didn't like Iron Man 2 either. Again, there's a lot there that they missed out on, and it is inconsistent. For me, when I look at the MCU, I kind of see it as a victim of its own success because they built up these expectations through that stellar Phase 3. Many of you will know that I love pro wrestling, and again, like, I don't want to kind of bore non-wrestling fans by getting too deeply into this, but I'll just kind of make a point that wrestling fans will be able to appreciate and will maybe contextualize what I understand. One thing I saw was that WWE used to produce 2 hours of content on television every single week, and those 2 hours for the most part were quite good. But then once they started getting more popular and once they started expanding more, they had more demands to produce more regular content. So they started producing 3-hour shows on Monday and 2-hour shows on Friday. And when they started producing more content, that meant the resources were stretched and the content started to become hit and miss. It wasn't that like all of the content was that bad. Like, some of the storylines when they hit, if you think about the likes of Becky Lynch's rise, like our own Ireland's Becky Lynch, her rise to becoming a main eventer. If you think of the likes of Sami Zayn right now, some of the storylines are as good as any, you put them aside, any great wrestling storyline from the past, but again, like, it's kind of that middle area which is a bit more hit and miss. And that's the same with Marvel. Again, they're expanding out to Disney Plus, they're doing weekly TV shows. We have to get used to the fact that not everything is going to be amazing because, again, they're just expanding and there's such a global demand for what they do. And that's okay. I'm okay with it being hit and miss. I'm okay with the discourse as long as it doesn't become a bit like Star Wars got during the most recent movie trilogy, and it just becomes fans attacking the thing that they're supposed to love and a bit toxic. I'm okay in us discussing if something was good or bad and debating that. Wakanda Forever, for example, I had very different opinions to a lot of other people, but I enjoyed having those discussions around it. And And that's part of being a fan and part of having an opinion. Not everything has to be amazing, and it's not a crisis if everything isn't amazing. We enjoy being Marvel fans. We enjoy look at this feeling of it being a week where a Marvel movie is released and making our plans around it, or kind of talking to our friends, or getting hyped, or theorizing and so on. So let's just enjoy doing that. And that's exactly what I'm going to do to get kicked off. I want to kind of talk you through some of what I'd like to see from Ant-Man Quantumania. And again, this is all very personal. Again, I don't expect them to cater personally towards me, and I'm not going to hold it against them if they don't. But these are just some random wish lists that I'd like to see. First off, and I can't believe that they haven't done this in some degree, and I hope they at least reference it in the movie or show a clip of it in the movie at the very, very least. There's been a thing in the MCU, particularly after the blip, where we see characters speculating about the events, particularly of Endgame, but just in general, like what happened with Thanos and stuff like that. And we're like, how did they know that? And then in Miss Marvel, it came out that Scott Lang started a podcast. Amazing concept, amazing information drop. Loved it. And the reason I loved it is because, like, he is the one character in the Avengers who would start a podcast and try to cash in on his fame. Amazing stuff. I'm surprised they never followed up on that. Again, I hope that we see at least a clip of it in this movie, but why did we not, like, again, I know it's crazy expensive. You're not going to, like, pay Paul Rudd to run a podcast for you, but, like, and then obviously you need to get screenwriters involved, and you need to make it consistent. Kevin Feige, you need to oversee. There's a lot of work that goes into that. But why not just give us one episode on Spotify as hype for this movie? I'd love to see it. Like, on a more serious note, I really want Marvel to reassure me that the concept of a multiverse isn't wasted on them, and that they have the creativity to do something beyond the disappointment of ideas that came with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Now, I know they were unfortunate enough to be released at the same time as Everything Everywhere All at Once, and that ran rings around them for what could be done in a multiverse. But I still would like to see them do something beyond pizza balls or green light means stop. There's an opportunity here, lads. Let's just do it. And I know, I know they're going into the quantum realm. But again, like, this is about multiverses. We've seen Kang in the end of Loki talk about, like, the variants of them and stuff like that. I'd like to see some different variants, not just the one that we seem to be getting. And that means traveling to different worlds and different multiverses, because that's where we're going, and that's the roadmap that they've kind of told us we're on. Like, one thing I'd love to see, for example, is get super meta about this. Travel to our universe. Like, go in and, like, where Scott Lang all of a sudden comes across Benedict Cumberbatch, and there's a monster chasing him, and he's like, "Quick, Doctor Strange, we got to do this." And Benedict is like, "What are you doing, Paul? Get away from me, you little weirdo." That's what I want to see. Get super meta. Like, why not do that? Like, what's stopping them? Our universe is presumably in this multiverse, so let's just go there. Why not? They have to do that at some stage, or this is a waste, to be honest. Lastly, the one thing I really don't want to see is, and I've no idea, by the way, I'm not a comic book, like, I am a comic book guy. I like to read comic books, but I don't have the religious kind of knowledge of that as a lot of other people. So I don't know what this is based on. I haven't read the comics this is based on, but I really don't want to see Scott Lang die. We're losing enough Avengers and enough kind of OGs, and I appreciate they are trying to renew it, and they're trying to bring in the young Avengers, and that's probably going to be a part of this without kind of getting too much into what I know there. So I don't want to see him die, but I do want to see him lose. And there is a very interesting point where there's a quote in one of the trailers where it's like, "I don't need to win, I just need us both to lose." I would like to see him lose, and I like it when the likes of Marvel or Star Wars end on a sour note, and when the good guys don't win the day. I feel that's interesting, but do it in a way where Scott Lang survives. I'm not ready to see the end of Ant-Man. I'm okay if he retires and goes off into the sunset, and, like, he's fulfilled his contractual duties, but give us a podcast. But I really, really don't want to see him die. Anyway, look, we're going to discuss it next week. We're going to discuss it in depth into the spoiler verse as well. So it's not just going to be my review. I'm going to get people on here, and we're going to have a spoiler-filled discussion. So go see the movie this weekend. We'll come back and we'll have the discourse. The movie doesn't have to be the best movie ever. Let's just go. Let's just enjoy it for what it is, and let's all just enjoy discussing it as fans afterwards.